Now on to the other major story, or at least one of the other major stories of the day. World powers are carefully examining Iran's proposal, which aims to resolve the dispute over its nuclear program. The high-stakes nuclear talks between Iran and 6 world powers are adjourned on an upbeat note Wednesday, the U.S. calling them serious and candid. Iran's foreign minister spoke of a possible new phase with the West.
I believe we have to start looking back, stop looking back and start looking forward and move towards greater understanding. And this proposal has been presented with a desire to foster greater understanding. The proposal was not presented with a view to simply pushing the agenda of one side, but in fact to start a new page.
But these talks are not without its critics. Before the talks resume next month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be briefed on the progress by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Robert Reardon is the author of Containing Iran: Strategies for Addressing the Iranian Nuclear Challenge. He joins us from the International Security Program at the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Good to be here.
I mean, we've heard about this conciliation on the part of the Iranians now since the election of Mr. Rouhani. But what is going to make these talks different from the talks that have been ongoing now for 2 years?
Well, the new leadership certainly makes this a different ballgame altogether. We're not dealing with Ahmadinejad. Certainly when you hear the new foreign minister, Javad Zarif, talk, you can see that the Iranians are really bringing their A team this time. These are people that have had a lot more contact with the West, and Zarif himself was educated in the United States. These are people that have been highly critical of the positions that the Ahmadinejad government has taken, and they are much more conscious of the damage that can be done in negotiations by things like Ahmadinejad's statements about denying the Holocaust or about Israel. They're much more conscious about how things like that can undermine their own interests. So certainly these are people that are more diplomatic, are more attuned into what sort of tactics are going to work in negotiations with the United States and the West, and what tactics are going to be self-defeating. One thing that I think we're yet to see is a substantial change, though, in the actual bargaining position. I think that on a substantive level, we're yet to see a major difference in terms of what sort of a deal Iran is actually willing to make.
Now, there have been varying reports about how close the Iranian nuclear program is to actually producing weaponized nuclear products or a weaponized atomic weapon. Where do you think they really are in this process, and is it their end game or part of their overall strategy?
You know, I think that the U.S. intelligence community has been right on this issue, in that we don't actually know what the intentions are of the Iranian leadership. A lot of people have been making the claim that the Iranians are dead set on getting nuclear weapons, and I don't think that we can draw that conclusion. There are a lot of reasons to believe that the Iranians are quite content to continue to slowly advance their nuclear capabilities and bring themselves as close to the threshold of weaponization as they can, but not actually cross it, because they certainly have a lot of reasons to believe that they have more to lose by doing that than they would have to gain. In terms of where they are now, I think it's fair to say that they already have the technical wherewithal to make a nuclear weapon if they chose to do so. The real issue is how long it would take them to get a weapon, and I think that we're at least a year from them being able to do that.
Now, the Iranians make the point that every time they let the IAEA inspectors into their country, shortly after that, there's some mishap or assassination with one of their engineers. But these talks, they've agreed, or at least have put on the table, that they are open to the possibility of snap visits by the inspectors. Where do you think the source of this is, and do you think it's real?
I think it's real, and I think that this is a key position that the Rouhani team has put forward all along, which is that they're willing to grant greater access. They're willing to grant greater transparency to their program. What they're not willing to do is to freeze enrichment or to give up enrichment. And I think that the big question is whether or not the United States and its allies are going to be able to accept that as part of a deal. Right now, the United States is saying we want, at a minimum, a freeze in enrichment. And perhaps we would allow Iran to start enriching uranium again at some point in the future. But first, they would have to satisfy all of our doubts about their intentions, and they would have to convince us that their program is peaceful. And I think that despite that being the official U.S. position, most people that are working in the U.S. government understand that that's not something that they're going to get, that Iran is simply not going to give up. Enrichment is not going to freeze it. So I think what the Iranians are saying is what we are willing to offer here is greater transparency. We're going to allow greater checks on our program to make it that much more difficult for us to make a weapon and give everybody that much quicker notice that if we were suddenly to try to do that.
Among the critics of the Iranians overall, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, you can add to that some U.S. lawmakers who have also been quite skeptical of the Iranians' intentions. Could their opposition to any kind of a deal put a monkey wrench in this whole process?
I think that that's actually a huge problem. If you look at what the Iranians are looking for here, they want some relief from sanctions. Sanctions are causing a great deal of economic pain, and they need to get out from under that. And in order to give them sanctions relief, most of these sanctions have been put into effect by Congress, and it's going to take congressional legislation to get them lifted. And you have to ask yourself, what sort of a deal could the Obama administration reasonably come back with and convince Congress to accept that deal and vote to lift some of these sanctions? And I'd say, it would have to be a very, very good deal for the United States at a minimum in order to convince Congress to do that.
Robert Reardon from the International Security Program at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.